They say some sounds aren't meant to be heard by the living. I didn't believe that until I heard it myself. A slow, steady click rising from the bottom of a well buried deep in the woods. At first it sounded mechanical, harmless, almost rhythmic. But the longer I listened, the more I realized it wasn't an echo. It was something alive, waiting. That same sound followed others too. A faceless man sitting motionless beside a black cat, gunshots tearing through a Texas quarry, and footsteps circling an abandoned mansion by the lake. None of these people should have met, yet their stories connect through that same impossible sound. Maybe it's a coincidence. Or maybe it's something older, something that moves through the forgotten places we aren't supposed to explore. You're about to hear what they found and what followed them home. Welcome to the channel where truth is whispered and the dead are only quiet until someone listens. Subscribe before the clicking starts again. I never thought of myself as a thrill seeker. I wasn't the type to go to parties or hang out with big groups. I was the kid who stayed inside, playing games alone, content with the sound of a keyboard instead of human voices. Maybe that's why exploring abandoned places became my thing. When you spend most of your life alone, silence starts to feel like a companion, and the ruins of forgotten places are full of silence. I started small: old barns, empty cemeteries at night, schools left to rot after budget cuts. When I got my license, the map opened up. I'd drive miles out into the countryside, park where the road ended, and walk through the woods to see what had been left behind. My friends thought I was weird, and maybe I was, but it felt like freedom. There was something about standing in a space that hadn't heard a voice in decades. It was like touching history that didn't want to be remembered. That's how I found the church. It wasn't on any map, but on Google Earth I noticed a small clearing surrounded by dense woods. The shape of a roof peeked out between the trees. I pinned it, wrote down the coordinates, and the next Saturday I went alone. The dirt road was barely a road at all, just two tracks cut through weeds. I parked when the trees grew too tight for the car and started walking. The forest was dead quiet except for the crunch of my boots. After about 10 minutes, I saw rusted metal half buried in the leaves, old trash cans, bent fencing, a cracked bucket. Then the trees opened, and there it was. The church stood crooked in the clearing, the white paint almost gone, the steeple leaning like it was tired of standing. But what caught my eye first was the well. It sat right in front of the church, a circle of stone no taller than my waist, covered in moss. Curiosity won over caution. I leaned over and looked inside. The darkness down there wasn't normal. It was bottomless, swallowing the light from my flashlight. When I listened, I heard something faint. Click. 2 seconds. Click. At first, I thought it was dripping water, but it was too sharp, too exact. Like someone tapping a stick against stone in rhythm. I stared down for longer than I should have, waiting for the sound to change, but it never did. Just that steady, impossible rhythm. Finally, I pulled myself away and headed for the church. The porch groaned under my weight, and when I pushed the door open, the sound echoed through the woods. Inside, dust hung thick in the air like smoke. Sunlight spilled through shattered, stained glass, painting the floor in faded colors. The pews were mostly gone or broken. The pulpit leaned forward as if the building itself were bowing. Behind it was an arched doorway leading into darkness. I took a few photos, the flash bursting through the gloom. Every picture looked like a place caught between living and dead. The hallway behind the pulpit was narrow and lined with doors that were either missing or half hanging. Cobwebs stretched across the ceiling like veins. At the end, stairs descended into shadow. I hesitated for the first time that day. Something about the open mouth of that basement made my chest tighten. Still, I went. Each step creaked like it was warning me to turn back. I counted 7 before my foot broke through the 8th. I fell hard, hitting dirt and debris. My flashlight flew from my hand. Pain shot through my spine, and before I could swear, I heard something. A voice. High-pitched, soft, speaking words I didn't recognize. It was like someone was trying to talk, but didn't know how. Only one word was clear: hello. The rest was gibberish, broken sounds wrapped in human tone. My flashlight had landed a few feet away, still on. I crawled to grab it, the beam shaking as I moved. The basement was small, full of junk, stone walls, a dirt floor. But on the far side, carved into the wall, was a tunnel. The voice was coming from inside. I should have run right then, but something in me wanted to see. I took a few steps toward it. The tunnel walls were uneven, clawed at by hand or shovel. My flashlight flickered. I smacked it, the noise echoing down the tunnel like a gunshot. The voice grew louder, faster, still nonsense, but now mixed with something else clicking. The same sound as the well. Then silence. I waited, breath caught, ears straining. For 3 long seconds there was nothing. Then click. 2 seconds. Click. Louder this time, like it was coming closer. My skin prickled. I turned and ran, my boots slipping on the dirt. I reached the stairs, grabbing the sides to pull myself up. The broken step gaped like a mouth waiting to swallow me, but I climbed over it, dragging myself into the hallway. I dropped the flashlight again, but didn't stop. I sprinted through the nave, past the cracked pews, and out the door. The forest hit me with silence. No birds, no wind, not even the sound of leaves. I stopped by the well just long enough to glance inside. The darkness stared back, still quiet. Then, from somewhere below, click. I didn't wait for another. I ran. Through the trees, over roots, branches slapping my face. The world felt too empty, like sound itself had been drained away. When I finally reached my car, I could barely breathe. I drove home without turning on the radio, every second expecting to hear that rhythm again under the hum of the tires. That night, I dreamed I was back at the well. I could see down into it this time, the clicking growing faster. At the bottom, something pale was moving, tapping a stick against the stone. When I woke up, I could still hear the rhythm faintly in my head, like it had followed me home. I told myself it was just nerves, that I'd imagined it. But every few nights, when the house is quiet and the world is still, I swear I hear it again. A single click, 2 seconds, then another. It started as a joke between friends, the kind of stupid thrill you chase when you're bored and the world feels too ordinary. There were 3 of us, John, Anthony, and me, and we'd been chased off of farmer's land the day before. He caught us fishing near his property and screamed that he'd call the cops. His dog nearly bit John's leg before we managed to run into the trees. We laughed about it later, but none of us could stop talking about that property. It was massive, covered in dense woods and farmland. And when you're young and dumb, getting told to stay away is the same thing as being dared to come back. So we did. The next day we went just before dark, cutting through the woods to avoid the road. The air felt heavy still, the kind of quiet that presses on your ears. When we finally reached the fence, John climbed first and I followed. The moment my boots hit the dirt on the other side, I felt it, like stepping into another world where sound didn't travel right. At first, it didn't seem bad. There were horses grazing near the tree line, their tails swishing lazily. Anthony reached out to pet one, and for a moment it was peaceful. Then I noticed something strange. Every pen, every stable, every field, only horses. No cows, no chickens, no dogs. Just horses. My uncle owned a farm back home, smaller than this, but full of noise and chaos. This place felt sterile, quiet, wrong. We kept walking and found the first house. The roof sagged, the windows were boarded up. Scattered around it were cars, expensive ones. I remember the shine of a Corvette logo under layers of dust, a Bentley with its hood missing, a Porsche without wheels. There were half-stripped engines, loose tires, and what looked like chopped-up Range Rovers. It didn't make sense. The place looked abandoned, but the cars hadn't been sitting there long. "Dude, someone's stealing these," John said, half laughing, half whispering. We started recording with our phones, whispering to each other about how crazy this was. There was an old RV next to the house, and John decided he wanted to look inside. He was the smallest, so I held the door open while he climbed in. It smelled like mold and metal. There was food, fresh enough to still have color. A half-eaten sandwich sat on a counter. There were fishing rods, bedding, and water bottles that hadn't gathered dust yet. Someone lived there. "Let's get out," I said. But John shook his head. Just one more minute. That was when Anthony, standing outside, froze. He tilted his head like he was listening. Then he whispered, "Someone's here." We went silent. The only sound was the distant creak of metal shifting in the wind. Then, faint but clear, the sound of a gate slamming shut. I peeked around the RV and saw headlights flicker through the trees far down the path but moving closer. A van. We ducked behind the cars and waited. My heart was beating so loud it felt like it would give us away. The headlights passed once, then vanished. We didn't move for a full minute. When we finally did, we decided to circle to the other side of the property, just to see what else was there. It was getting darker, the sun dying behind the tree line, but we had flashlights. The second house we found looked worse, half collapsed, walls caved in. Near it sat an enormous camper, at least 50 feet long, completely covered in vines. I almost missed it until the beam of my light hit something metallic, a jet ski, sitting beside it, also smothered in ivy. "Okay, this is insane," I whispered. "We should leave." John was already pulling the camper door open. "Come on, one look." Inside was dark, silent. I could smell something foul, like rotting meat. Anthony gagged and covered his mouth. "What the hell is that?" We backed away fast, laughing nervously to cover the fear. "Maybe a dead animal," I said. "Hopefully." That's when the horses started making noise. Loud, frantic, stomping the ground. Their panic set off every alarm in my body. And then we heard it, a gate clanging open again, closer this time. A door slamming. Footsteps. We bolted toward the woods. But before we reached the trees, John stopped dead in his tracks. "Look," he whispered. I followed his gaze and saw them. Two figures at a table about 50 feet away. A man and a woman. The man sat completely still, his head tilted slightly toward us. A black cat perched on the table beside him. But what froze me wasn't the cat. It was his face, or what should have been his face. There were no features. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a smooth white surface that caught the faint light of the sky. The woman beside him turned, and her eyes locked on mine. I'll never forget that moment. She didn't yell, didn't move at first. Then, without a sound, she started running toward us. "Go!" I shouted. We sprinted into the trees. Branches whipped at my face, roots caught my boots. Behind us, I could hear her crashing through the brush, fast, inhumanly fast. Anthony was screaming something, but the words didn't make sense. My flashlight beam jumped and swung wildly, slicing through the dark. We didn't stop running for what felt like forever. Every few seconds, I thought I heard footsteps behind us or hooves. A galloping rhythm that didn't belong in the woods. The air smelled wrong, thick and sour, and the darkness between the trees seemed to move with us. Finally, when my lungs were on fire, the noise faded. We reached the old fence, climbed over, and collapsed on the other side. The farm lay silent behind us. Not even the horses made a sound now. No one spoke for a long time. Then John said quietly, "Did you see his face?" I didn't answer. I didn't want to say yes. I didn't want to believe what I'd seen. We made it back to the car, drove home without turning on the headlights until we hit the main road. Every shadow looked like it was following us. For days afterward, none of us talked about it. When we finally did, we couldn't agree on what we'd seen. Anthony swore the man's face was covered in bandages. John said it wasn't bandages, it was skin, stretched smooth like wax. I don't know which is worse. I still dream about it sometimes. The cat, sitting perfectly still on the table. The faceless man turning his head toward me. The woman running. And the sound of hoofs echoing long after we left. If it was a prank, it was the cruelest one I've ever seen. But part of me knows it wasn't a prank at all. Because sometimes, late at night, when I close my eyes, I see that white face again, staring back at me. And this time, it's smiling. Texas heat has a way of pressing down on you, even when the sun starts to fall. The air gets heavy, like it's waiting for something. Maybe that's why the quarry already felt wrong before anything even happened. The first time we went, it was just supposed to be fun, cliff jumping, swimming, that kind of thing. We'd seen videos of people doing it online, and it looked harmless enough. The place was only a half-hour drive from where we lived. The videos didn't mention the fences, the warning signs, or the way locals said to stay far away after dark. There were 5 of us that day, me, my best friend Miles, his cousin Josh, and a couple of others. The road there was just a dirt track winding through fields. On one side, there were a few metal buildings that looked like old storage units. On the other, a chain link fence topped with faded "No trespassing" signs. But the one that stuck in my head was a piece of cardboard nailed to a post. In thick red paint, it read, "Trespassers will be shot on sight." We laughed when we saw it. You had to, or else admit how uneasy it made you feel. This was Texas. People had guns, sure, but nobody really did that, right? We parked in an empty gravel lot by an abandoned building and started walking. The quarry wasn't far. Every step crunched on dry earth, and the air smelled of dust and oil. A truck passed us once, slow and quiet. The driver looked at us through his window without expression, just a long stare before he kept going. None of us said anything, but we all felt the same chill. Once we reached the edge of the quarry, the unease melted away for a while. It was beautiful in its own raw way, a massive pit filled with still blue water surrounded by cliffs of stone. We jumped the fence easily and found a lower ledge to start from. Miles jumped first, whooping as he hit the water. The sound echoed off the rock walls, bouncing back like laughter. For a while, it was fun. We climbed, we jumped, we swam. The water was cold, almost too cold for the heat of the day. Then, after about an hour, we saw the first snake. It cut across the water's surface silently, its body gleaming in the sunlight. We froze until it disappeared, then climbed out fast. "That's it for me," Josh said, half joking. "Nature's saying get out." We laughed, packed up, and headed back. We should have left it at that. 2 months later, Miles asked if I'd go again. He'd found new cliffs on Google Earth, ones we hadn't tried. "We'll go with a bigger group," he said. What's the worst that could happen? It was already evening when we went back. This time I drove. We parked at a small church 2 minutes away from the quarry so the woman with the black Hummer wouldn't see our car. Yeah, there was a woman. She'd been there the first time too. She'd driven up, screamed at us for trespassing, and told someone named John to get the gun. She let us leave, but her voice stuck with me. Cold, sharp, like she meant it. We walked the dirt road quietly, flashlights off. Every sound felt louder than it should have been. A few cars passed, and one stopped long enough for the driver, a young guy, to lean out and say, "Watch for the black Hummer." He wasn't joking. His face was dead serious. Then he drove off. That should have been the second warning. When we reached the fence, we jumped it again. The air was cooler this time, the sky bruised purple. We went straight for the second cliff, a bigger one, tucked away behind a bend in the quarry. For a while, it was peaceful. We joked, we jumped, we dared each other to go higher. Then a silver van appeared at the end of the dirt road. It didn't move for a while, just sat there, engine idling. It wasn't the black Hummer, but something about it felt off. The driver's window was down. We could see a shape inside, but not clearly. "Maybe they're waiting for someone," Miles whispered. That's when the first gunshot rang out. It cracked through the air like thunder, echoing against the cliffs. Birds exploded from the trees in a rush of wings. Then another shot, closer this time. Someone screamed, I think it was Josh. We ran. No plan, no direction. Just away. The path was rough and the quarry edge dropped steeply on one side. I could hear the bullets hitting stone somewhere behind us, the ping echoing off the rock. Another shot, then another. 8, maybe more. It felt like the whole quarry was shaking. We reached the fence, hands bleeding as we climbed over it. I hit the ground hard and turned to help Aiden over. He was shaking so bad he almost missed the top. When he landed, I looked back once and I swear I saw movement near the van. A person stepping out, holding something long in their hands. Then headlights flooded the road ahead. A white pickup truck stopped in front of us. It was the same guy who'd warned us earlier. "Get in," he yelled. We didn't hesitate. We piled into the truck bed, the metal burning hot under our hands. He floored it, kicking up dust and gravel as we tore down the road. No one looked back until we hit the main highway. When we did, the van was gone. The guy dropped us off near our car, said, "Don't come back," and drove away without another word. We sat there for a long time, too shaken to even start the engine. Finally, Miles whispered, "Do you think they were shooting at us?" No one answered. We never reported it. Who would believe a bunch of kids trespassing where they shouldn't be? The police would have asked why we were there in the first place. And deep down, I think none of us wanted to know the truth. That night, I dreamed of the quarry again. The cliffs were taller, sharper. In the dream, I was standing at the edge, looking down into the still water. I could see the reflection of the silver van floating on the surface. Then, from the water itself, came the faint sound click, click, slow and deliberate, echoing from somewhere below. I woke up sweating, heart pounding. It's been years since that night, but I still can't drive down a dirt road without checking my mirrors. Sometimes, when the engine's quiet and the radio's off, I think I hear that sound again. 2 slow clicks, like someone tapping metal against stone. Maybe it's just in my head. Or maybe it's still waiting at the bottom of that quarry, remembering us. Some places feel wrong the moment you see them, like the air itself remembers something terrible. The house by Lake Harlow was one of those places. My cousin Ryan and I had been doing urban exploration for years, but this one had a reputation. Locals said it used to belong to a rich family who vanished overnight in the late 90s. They left everything behind: food on the table, clothes in the closet, toys in the playroom. Theories ranged from bankruptcy to cults to something worse. Every town has a house like that. The kind people dare each other to visit but never actually do. Until we did. We parked half a mile away at a hiking trail and went in through the woods. The sky was gray, the kind of color that flattens everything. I could smell the lake before I saw it, damp and metallic. Then the roof appeared through the trees, the black shingles curling like burnt paper. The house was massive, 3 stories tall, windows boarded from the inside, a porch that looked ready to collapse. The iron gate out front had been bent open years ago. We didn't even bother with it. As soon as we stepped onto the porch, the boards groaned under our boots. Ryan looked at me, grinning nervously. "You ready?" I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The door opened without resistance, as if the house had been waiting for someone to come back. Inside, the smell hit me first: dust, mildew, something faintly sweet, like fruit that had gone bad years ago. Our flashlights cut through the dark. The first room was the kitchen. Plates still sat in the sink, a coffee cup half filled with something crusted brown. A calendar on the wall read May 1997. "It's like they just left," Ryan whispered. We moved slowly through the rooms. The living room looked like a set for a ghost story. Furniture covered in yellowed sheets, a fireplace filled with old ash. The walls were lined with family photos, birthdays, Christmas mornings, barbecues. The people looked so alive it made my chest hurt. In some pictures, their faces had faded to white, the sun bleaching away their features. It looked like the smiles had been erased. Upstairs, things got stranger. The first bedroom was untouched except for the drawers, all of them open and empty. Another room was filled with newspapers covering the floor, every page open to the classified section. I didn't notice at first, but Ryan pointed it out. All of them were from the same week in July, 1997. Every circled ad was about private buyers looking for quiet transactions. Cars, land, jewelry. Like someone was preparing to disappear. The master bedroom was worse. Heavy curtains sealed out what little light remained. When I pulled them back, I realized the windows were boarded over from the inside. There was a closet with a heavy padlock on it. The wood around the lock was scratched, gouged deep like someone had tried to drag something heavy out but couldn't. Ryan wanted to break it open. I told him no. We didn't have tools, and I didn't like the idea of forcing anything in this house. It felt wrong, like we were guests at a funeral. He agreed reluctantly, and we decided to check the basement before leaving. The door to the basement was behind the kitchen. It opened easily, but the air that came out was thick and cold, smelling of damp stone and mold. Our flashlights barely reached the bottom. Each step creaked loud enough to make me wince. The basement was huge, the stone walls glistening with moisture. Shelves lined one wall, empty except for a few rusted cans and a cracked lantern. Then our beams caught something in the center of the room. 5 chairs, old wooden ones, each a different style, arranged in a perfect circle. Unlike everything else in the house, they weren't dusty. The seats were clean, polished by use. Ryan and I just stood there for a long time, listening to the silence press against us. Maybe squatters, I said finally, but even as I said it, I didn't believe it. That's when we heard it. A sound from upstairs. A door closing. The noise was so sharp in the stillness that we both froze. Then came footsteps. Slow, steady, crossing the floor directly above us. We turned off our flashlights instantly. The darkness was total. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The steps moved down the hallway above, pausing every few seconds, like whoever it was listening. Then the sound stopped right above the basement door. The handle rattled. Ryan grabbed my arm, his nails digging into my sleeve. Neither of us breathed. The handle rattled again, harder this time. Then silence. We didn't wait. Ryan grabbed my sleeve and pulled me toward the far wall where a small window sat half broken near the ceiling. It was barely big enough to fit through, but we didn't care. I climbed first, scraping my arm on the frame. The air outside hit me like a shock, cold, sharp, real. I dropped to the dirt and turned to help Ryan through. Before he climbed out, something creaked above us. A floorboard. Then another. "Come on," I hissed. He slipped through, hitting the ground beside me. We ran without looking back. The woods swallowed us. The branches clawed at our clothes as we pushed through, not stopping until we could see the faint outline of the road. Only when we reached the car did I dare to look back. The house stood dark against the lake, a shape more than a building. But there, by the basement door, a figure stood. Too far to see clearly, too still to be human. The head tilted slightly, like it was watching us. I blinked and it was gone. We drove home in silence. Neither of us spoke the whole way. When we finally reached Ryan's house, he just sat there in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. There were 5 chairs, he said finally. 5. What if we made 6? I didn't answer. A few days later, Ryan messaged me. He posted in a local Facebook group asking about the property. Some older man replied, saying people had seen lights there at night, movement in the windows, and once, a woman standing on the porch even though the place had been empty for years. He said the chairs weren't new. They'd always been there. Every time someone broke in and moved them, they'd be back in the same circle within days. That was the last message Ryan sent me about it. We never went back. But sometimes, when I pass a lake or see an old house out of the corner of my eye, I think about that circle of chairs and wonder what or who sits in them now. And at night, when it's quiet enough, I swear I can still hear the soft sound of wood creaking, as if someone just sat down. Every explorer has a moment when the thrill ends and something colder takes its place. For me, it wasn't one place or one night, it was realizing all those stories connect in ways that shouldn't be possible. The well in the woods, the faceless man, the gunshots at the quarry, the house by the lake. Different people, different states, but every one of them described the same sound. A slow, deliberate click echoing through the dark. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe it was water dripping with settling, nerves playing tricks. But the more I thought about it, the less I believed that. Too many patterns lined up. The rhythm, the silence that followed, the feeling that something was there, just beyond sight, waiting for someone to notice. You tell yourself fear isn't real, that it's just your mind exaggerating shadows. But that's what makes it dangerous. Because fear is also a warning, and ignoring it can get you hurt or worse. Every person in those stories heard it, the moment when curiosity whispered louder than common sense. And when they crossed the line, something crossed with them. Maybe what's haunting those places isn't a ghost. Maybe it's the weight of everything people leave behind: regret, violence, secrets. Maybe the click is the sound of memory repeating itself, trapped in stone and metal, trying to remind us that some things shouldn't be disturbed. I still think about the man with no face, about the woman who ran through the dark, the figure at the basement door, the echo that followed the sound of gunfire. And I think about the silence that always comes after, the way nature itself seems to hold its breath, as if listening. If you ever go exploring, remember this: places become abandoned for a reason. It's not always about money or decay. Sometimes the walls remember more than they should. Sometimes the ground keeps secrets it doesn't want unearthed. If you hear a sound that doesn't belong, one that makes your chest tighten and your thoughts freeze, don't listen too long. Don't wait to understand it. Just leave. Because curiosity doesn't just take you to strange places, it brings those places back with you. And if, someday, you're lying awake at night, the world quiet around you, and you hear it one click, 2 seconds, another, don't go looking for where it came from. That's not the sound finding you. That's the sound remembering you. Welcome back to the channel where the forgotten speak through the brave and the curious. If you've made it this far, you already know some stories shouldn't be told. But since you're still here, subscribe if you dare, because next time, the sound you hear might not be from the story. It might be from the room you're in right now.